Wonderful. Welcome everyone, and I'm just gonna share my screen. My name's Elizabeth Marks. I'm the director of the Pennsylvania Utility Law Project. Really happy to be here today with an excellent panel of friends and colleagues to talk to you about kind of the intersection of housing and energy policy. Um, welcome to the session. I'm glad you could join us today. I just want to start by saying, we're at a crossroads, and it wasn't unintentional to use the word intersectional here. There's so many things that are intersectional about the current moment. In our country, and certainly housing and energy are at the forefront of all of that. It wasn't COVID that brought this current crisis to bear. It has been long time coming. And as housing costs increase, so have energy and water costs. And so we've been seeing kind of an affordability crisis growing over the last decade plus as the costs of basic utility services increased. And we're going to talk a lot about that today from different perspectives. We'll get some kind of a broad overview of energy affordability and how that relates to tenants and how tenants are kind of what they're facing. We're also going to get a building owner perspective on and some tips about how to access energy efficiency programs through your utility that are available not just for tenants but also for building owners. And then we're going to talk about the importance of kind of bringing this all together and talking about health and housing. And so we have really three excellent speakers. Josie Pickens from the Community Legal Services. She's the co-director of the energy unit there. We also have Sarah Rollich, who's the energy and construction manager at Action Housing. And we have Jamal Lewis, who's the policy and technical specialist for Green and Healthy Homes. But before I turn it over to them, and I do want to get to them because they all have a lot to talk about, I just want to get a sense of who is in the audience so that we have an idea of who we're talking to. So if you can put in there in the chat who you are and what your title or what sector you come to us from, whether it's from, the housing perspective, if you're a support services, if you're a kind of an energy manager, some folks may be that. Where do you come from? And then since we are kind of straddling the state, we thought we consulted as a panel beforehand and thought we'd ask, is it gritty or is it the Pens? And so if you put that in the chat so we can get an idea, that would be awesome. But without further ado, what I'm going to do is turn it over to Josie Pickens to take us through the first part of the presentation. We'll walk through each presentation, but I want to encourage you all to type questions in the chat box as we go. If I can, in between the speakers, I'm going to slip in some of those questions, but otherwise we've built in time into the presentation to be able to have a good question and answer period. So do type them in as we go, and we'll hopefully be able to get to your questions. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Josie.
Thank you, Liz. I'm ready when you are. So I started a little timer to keep myself moving at a nice pace. I'm going to talk a little bit about housing stability and utility affordability. The energy unit at Community Legal Services, we represent residential energy consumers in disputes and policy advocacy to improve utility, energy, and water affordability. Next slide. So the loss of utility service, we've often in our work refer to utility service as an essential service. And I think now more than ever, it's apparent to not just energy advocates, but our greater society that a loss of utility service is a threat to public health. as we think about the need for water, hand washing, hot water for sanitation, as we think about the heating and cooling needs of families who are in their homes doing life. Um, and as we think about slowing the transmission of the virus and keeping people safely at home, the need for utility service is more apparent than ever. And the loss of utility service destabilizes housing. I think there is the need for the service to meet its function, the need for the service to keep homes comfortable, but also the need for service to prevent evictions, displacement, and homelessness is something we have been sounding the alarm about, that people who are unable to keep up with utility costs and who are shut off, they may be in violation of their lease terms. They may be evicted. They may reside in those homes without service in conditions that are unsafe and inhumane. So I think now more than ever, the need for affordable utility service has come to the forefront. Next. In Pennsylvania, we have had a moratorium on utility shutoffs imposed by the PUC Commission since March. And it was initially an absolute prohibition on shutoffs, but we've moved into a phase 2 of that protection, where now customers up to 300% of the poverty level are protected through March 31st of 2021. But the future is very much still undecided, and we have a lot of advocacy to do to make sure that the protections remain in place, and to ensure that the arrears that have accumulated are equitably resolved. Nearly 1 million customers are behind on their bills in Pennsylvania on the energy end, and those arrears are over $800 million, up 70%. So we need short-term and long-term solutions to address these affordability concerns. And energy efficiency programs are a win-win. They improve the home, both the health and safety and the energy efficiency in the home. And they also drive down the energy cost for the homeowner or the landlord. Next. PUC, the energy burdens in Pennsylvania, energy burdens have to do with the percentage of household incomes spent on home energy bills. As you can see from this table, for customers who are low income, even those customers who are enrolled in utility affordability programs can have energy burdens that are substantially higher than the average energy burden, up to 20% for the lowest income homes. Next slide. There are unique challenges facing tenants, and I would encourage everyone to look at the data from the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy that's found that low-income households, renters, African American, and Latino households pay more for utilities per square foot than the average household. Next. And it's able from a report published by ACEE found that if you look at the median annual utility cost per square foot, renters are paying more on average than owners. African American households are paying more than any other household, and Latino households are paying more than white households. Oh, the median US energy burden in that sample was 3.5. And you can see that for renters and people of color, that was a higher percentage. The report found that improving the energy efficiency of the housing stock does equal a reduction in these excess energy burdens. So it's clear that energy efficiency is a key component to bill affordability for renters, people of color, and low-income households. Next slide. Tenants in Pennsylvania, and this data that I'm including is for Philadelphia's metropolitan area. This is census data, and you can see that although the rate of utility shutoff notices for both tenants and owners has increased over the past several years, the rate of actual disconnections for tenants has significantly increased. At 22% of tenants who receive shut-up notices are actually terminated, while only 6.5% of owners. Next slide. So what are the barriers to getting tenants into energy efficiency programs? One of them that I wanted to just focus on for the purposes of this presentation, increasing landlord participation and responsiveness to the existing programs. Services are often denied because landlords refuse to participate or they fail to respond to utility solicitation. So in a recent rate case proceeding, we learned that the rate of landlords who failed to respond to solicitation significantly exceeded the rate of landlords who refused. So a lot of tenants and a lot of households were unable to access the services simply because a landlord received a notice that there were services available for the household and the landlord didn't respond to the solicitation. So in our advocacy, we've been trying to create more notification processes so that landlords have ample opportunities to take advantage of these programs. But a key component in making sure tenants have access is to increase landlord engagement. And then I briefly list some of the programs available to provide free energy reduction, energy efficiency and usage reduction services to energy consumers and tenants. So there's a statewide mandate to reduce energy consumption, and the electric distribution companies offer services through their Act 129 programs. There's the low income usage reduction program, which is part of the universal service programs in Pennsylvania. Those programs that exist to help consumers afford their energy cost. There's the federal weatherization assistance program, and there's a component of LIHEAP, the federal energy assistance grant program. There's actually a LIHEAP interface program that provides free heating system repairs and replacements. And tenants are able to access that program, but they need the landlord's consent. And so the provision of a free heating system or the replacement of an inoperable heating system could reduce energy cost by eliminating de facto heating where people are using space heaters or kerosene heaters. And it can also improve the safety in the home because those alternate mechanisms are fire hazards and health hazards, and also improve the comfort in the home and significantly decrease the cost for the person who's paying the bill, the ratepayer, whether it's the tenant or the landlord. Next slide. And then finally, a barrier to tenant bill affordability is customer access. And we encourage homeowners and landlords where possible to provide tenants with an option to become the customer, because when the tenant is the customer, they're able to access these low-income customer assistance programs, which are run by the utility. They provide a discount on these service and arrearage forgiveness and management, while making the low-income usage reduction services available to the consumer. The PUC at the outset of this part of the presentation, I talked about those energy burdens and how they could be at up to 20% for the lowest income families. But we have good news in Pennsylvania, because in 2019, the commission approved a modification to those energy burdens, and has adopted guidance that the maximum energy burden for the very lowest income consumers will be reduced to 6% maximum, and the maximum energy burden for customers above 50%, up to 150% of poverty, would be reduced to 10%. And when you think about that in comparison to those averages at the beginning, 12%, 14%, up to 20%, you see that is a significant reduction in energy burden. And so getting tenants and consumers access to customer status is a way for them to get significantly reduced bills. And it also provides them with direct access to grant assistance, because when the tenant is the consumer, they're able to directly access funds to pay down the bills. So that's a little bit of a potpourri, covering some of the intersections that I see between housing and energy affordability. And the end goal is keeping costs low while getting consumers access to programs to improve the quality of the housing, the health and safety, and the energy efficiency in the home. Thank you.
Thanks, Josie. That I think helps really set the stage for some of the practical things that Sarah's about to talk about with kind of how, from a housing perspective, you can access some of these programs. I just want to remind people to type your questions in the chat box, and we will have some Q&A at the end. But I want to turn it over next to Sarah Rolich, who's the Energy and Construction Manager at Action Housing, to talk us through kind of another perspective of this energy housing nexus.
Thank you, Liz. I'm Sarah with Action Housing, as she mentioned. You can go to the next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about energy from a housing developer and owner's perspective. Action Housing is a nonprofit affordable housing developer, owner, and manager in Western Pennsylvania. We are also Pennsylvania's largest weatherization provider, so we bring a unique kind of perspective to new construction as far as and renovation and the needs of low-income customers of utilities. Next slide, please. I'm just going to introduce a few of our past projects to give you an example of some of our work. This is Uptown Lofts North. It is a new construction, passive house certified multifamily building that currently houses our My Place program, which is for youth who have aged out of the foster care the system. And we have, a full case manager staff who works out of this building as well. Next slide. This is our McKeesport Downtown Housing. It is a historic YMCA in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, that was in risk of closing due to the unaffordability of the operating costs. It is single room occupancy housing with common bathrooms and kitchens. And there is also a shelter that runs out of the building as well. We were able to secure low-income housing tax credits in 2012, and we completed the renovation in 2013. By using passive house standards, we were able to renovate the building to very high energy efficiency standards that produce low operating costs. We were able to save about 67% energy from, baselining the year prior to the year after renovation. So that was a huge success for us. Next slide, please. Josie talked a lot about the need of energy affordability and the energy burden situation, but also there's a huge need just in the building stock, multifamily stock of buildings in Pennsylvania. Estimated 60% of affordable housing was built over 20 years ago. Older affordable multifamily buildings often have deferred maintenance. They're energy efficient, but they also lack necessary funds for improvements. And as Josie mentioned, efficiency investments in housing can reduce, can save energy, reduce energy bills, create more stable rent payments, reduce pollution, and there's also a lot of health and safety aspects that Jamal is going to talk about next. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about utility rebates for new construction housing. Just to kind of caveat, all utility programs in each utility are a little bit different. So I'm going to talk about my interactions with our local utility. But if you have any questions, you should definitely reach out to your utility in your service area for specific guidance on their utility program offerings. So why do we do this? Well, PHFA requires a utility rebate analysis for all new LIHTC projects. And electric utilities will analyze your project for projected savings over their chosen baseline. So it's a good way to use utility funds to invest in a higher energy efficient building than you might have been able to build. So they're basically going to take a look at your design and evaluate it over their baseline, which is now the 2015 IECC, which is the International Energy Code. And they're going to look at your lighting and your appliance, and they're going to basically come up with a estimated rebate number for you that you can kind of include in your projected costs for the building. Now, the process is typically started in the design phase and is usually completed with a final inspection. That's basically to verify that everything that you said that you were going to install, you did, and that's when you get your final rebate amount. So the rebate goes to the owner and developer. So that's typically how that works. And as I said, all utility programs are a little different. So check with yours if you want to pursue that. Next slide, please. So the importance of an energy model when you're talking about new construction or a renovation. If you do an energy model, the larger rebates are typically available because if it's a electrically heated building, then they can factor that into the utility savings if you do decide to install higher efficiency electric heating. So that's a good reason to do that. And also, these days, Action Housing typically builds to Enterprise Green Community and Energy Star standards with the focus on the building's EUI, which is the energy use intensity. So we take what we've learned from Passive House and from other building standards, and we basically design the best building that we can afford. And we use the energy model to evaluate that during design and during value engineering. If we want to value engineer windows, we make sure we run it through the energy model to determine if we are willing to accept a lower or a higher EUI in that case. And that's how we make our decisions monetarily and based on energy. The energy model will estimate the utility cost for the building, which is really helpful whenever you're planning ahead for your operating costs. And this is just a little example of a graph that I pulled from one of our energy models. It breaks down electric and gas and what's using what. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of talk about what do you do for existing buildings, and that kind of brings in energy management. So it's basically the process of monitoring, controlling, and conserving energy. So you have to understand your energy usage first, and you need to plan what you want to do about it, and that's where a lot of these utility programs come in. And you implement it, and then you verify through further benchmarking of your utility usage. And that has a lot to do with data and collection of data. Next slide, please. So energy retrofits for existing buildings. This can utility rebates versus direct install programs, and this is really for single family and multifamily. Utility programs have programs for both, and a lot of the times the residential programs overlap between single family and multifamily. It can help building owners upgrade aging equipment without digging into their reserves too much, but first it's a good idea to do some baselining of your buildings to compare the buildings based on energy usage to find the largest electric users. That way you can target buildings that need energy retrofits first, and take inventory of lighting and electric equipment, because that'll help whenever you speak with your utility provider about any programs that are available. And determine how the building is metered, master metered versus individually metered. This will determine what programs your building qualifies for. That basically just means if there's one meter for the whole building and the tenants don't pay their own electric, or if the building has a meter for each apartment and the tenants do pay, that'll put you into different programs. And with this information, you can pull together a list of priority buildings with electrical energy efficiency needs. So that's, okay, you can go to the next slide, please. So I mentioned baselining and how important that is to do first, to understand how your buildings are operating and the operating expenses and things like that. So there are a few methods to do that. Baselining through a data scraping program like Energy Scorecards, Energy Star Portfolio Manager, or WeGoWise. It basically means that they data scrape from your online utility account into their program, and it does it every month. And so you just set it up once and it just continues to pull your data. These are good tools to use to constantly monitor your building's energy usage. And it's whenever you have tenant meters, it can be a little tricky getting the data. A lot of utilities now are trying to implement the whole building aggregation, which means you can see the whole building usage without getting without needing access to each tenant's specific energy data, which can get complicated from a legal from a perspective. Next slide, please. And if you don't want to do that, you don't want to pay for those services, some of them are free, some of them are not, or if your utility doesn't have the data scraping options, you can just enter your, use an Excel spreadsheet, enter your bills. It's a little bit more time consuming, but it does the exact same thing. Next slide, please. So baselining and EUI, energy use intensity. I mentioned this when I was talking about new construction, but the EUI is basically the amount of energy per square foot per year that your building is using. And that makes it very easy to compare buildings because it's kind of evening it out per square foot. So obviously a 100-unit building is going to use more energy than a 30-unit building, but this makes it so it compares them based on square foot. So it's not taking, you don't have to look at the bigger buildings or smaller buildings. Takes into account all energy being used, gas, electric, oil. But since we are dealing with only electric programs in Pennsylvania for Act 129, a large EUI for a building that's heated with gas may be misleading if you want to go down that path of talking to your utility provider about those programs. And depending on how the building is metered, it might be useful just to look at the house electric account and also how your HVAC in your building is done. Some buildings, you know, with newer all electric heat, most of that is on the house meter. So a lot of times you don't even have to get into the tenant data if that's what you're looking at. The house electric account usually serves the common area lighting and plug load in an individually metered building, but in master meter building, it serves the all electric for the entire building. So that's a good tool to look at. Next slide. So rebate versus direct install. This is for the utility program. So as I said, each utility runs their programs differently. Rebates are typically paid to the owner after installation of new equipment has been done and verified. So that is, you hire your own contractor, you determine what you want to do, and you pay to have it installed, and then you apply for a rebate from your utility, and you get that check. Direct install programs are usually more comprehensive, but they're typically managed by the utilities CSP, which is basically their subcontractor that works for them, that runs these programs. And often they will come in and they will evaluate your lighting and, you know, possibly electric heaters if that's what you have in your building, and they will determine you know, what can be upgraded and the costs to do that, and they will you know, determine your electric savings, and they will do the install for you. And there's often some cost sharing for larger projects whenever you're doing that direct install, where, you know, they'll make you pay 30% of the total cost, but you're going to save X amount of energy over 10 years. So that makes it worthwhile. And they'll run through all of that with you. And a lot of those programs, depending on your utility, of course, you know, can be done in tenant units and in common areas, depending on how their programs are run. But you usually need the tenants to sign up for these programs, but often it's very, you know, it's very lucrative for both. And in those types of programs, the tenant and the owner has the potential to see savings, and obviously get new equipment such as refrigerators, lighting, things like that. If the building is aging, some of those things may be good for you. Next slide, please. So kind of wrapping it up, it's important to, you know, not install any new energy efficient electrical equipment without talking to your utility first. You just want to make sure that if you want to invest in your buildings, and if there are rebate dollars available, that you are doing everything that you need to do to meet their requirements. Oftentimes, even if it's a rebate where you are responsible for installing the equipment and paying for it up front, but they still might have requirements, like the light fixtures need to be Energy Star, or you know, they have to be certain brands to meet their program requirements. So if you put something in that's not approved, then you're not eligible for that rebate. So you'd be missing out, essentially. So it just requires prior approval sometimes to do those things. So that is, that's all I have for today, Liz.
Thanks, Sarah. Really good information from the building owner perspective. There are some excellent questions in the chat already, and I am holding all of those questions. We're going to have a question and answer period at the end, but I do want to make sure that we have ample time to talk about the last aspect or perspective we're going to bring in here from Jamal Lewis, who is the Senior Policy and Technical Assistance Specialist for Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. And so we're going to kind of bring this full circle. We started out talking about kind of the energy burden issue from a tenant's perspective and some of the challenges with getting, you know, keeping people stably housed from an energy perspective, then talked about kind of from the building perspective, and now we'll kind of bring it back around and talk about that intersection with how does this healthy housing intersect. So I'm going to turn it over to Jamal. Encourage you to keep typing in your questions in the chat box. They're very good questions, and we'll get to those shortly. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Jamal.
Thank you, Liz, and wonderful presentations by Josie and Sarah. Again, I'm Jamal. I work with the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. That is a nonprofit organization that works to advance healthy housing and energy efficiency across the country. I've had the pleasure of working with Liz and Sarah in Pennsylvania for a number of years, and on some of our energy policy work. But I've also had the opportunity to work in Pennsylvania on some other healthy homes projects as well. I'm going to take a step back from looking specifically at Pennsylvania, and then I'll bring it back towards the end. Next slide, please. So this was brought up by both Sarah and Josie, but they're looking at the housing stock across the US. There are over 30 million families that are living in unhealthy homes. And essentially what that means is there is something in their home that is making them sick. And that could be mold, radon, other air pollution, lead-based paint. And so, you know, that's a lot of families. And you know, the burden is pretty significant. You know, thinking about the impact of living in an unhealthy home, you see some of those here. You can get some missed school days, missed work days. There's tremendous healthcare costs associated with it. And then you see, and was mentioned earlier, there is a significant burden when it comes to energy affordability as well. Next slide. So, you know, this slide comes from the Energy Information Administration that conducted its first ever study that included energy insecurity, which is the inability of households to meet their basic energy needs. And pre-COVID, they came up with a number about a third of all Americans were unable to meet their basic energy needs, and that's a tremendous number. 1 in every 3 people, 1 in every 3 households is really significant. And what energy insecurity can be characterized, as you can see from this graph, in a variety of different ways. It can be inability to pay. It can be the inability of the energy infrastructure to work properly, or it could mean that the household is taking initiative to heat or cool their homes in ways that aren't safe, and that could be driven by a whole host of situations. But 1 in 3 is a pretty significant number. But this impact and the burdens that was in the previous slide are not distributed equally. And so next slide, please. So just went into just one of the disproportionate population impact on one of the populations, and that is African Americans. I mean, there are, and so this publication on the right that I had the pleasure of working with 2 well-known professors in the public health space, we outlined just the degree in which African Americans are disproportionately impacted by issues that are related to housing and energy, and we listed those there. And there is a tremendous inequity that exists when it comes to housing and energy relating to African Americans. But as Josie mentioned as well, there are also other inequities that exist as well, with Latinos paying a high energy burden, renters paying a high energy burden. And so it's important that all of these classes of people are able to access resources that can help alleviate these inequities. Next slide, please. So at GHHI, we operate by a whole house strategy. And what that means is when we're going into a home, so we have the pleasure of running some direct service programs across the country to improve efficiency, but also to eliminate health hazards as well. So when we go into a home, We aim to perform a comprehensive assessment that can identify health hazards like lead, asthma triggers, or injury hazards, but also doing and conducting an energy audit as well to identify opportunities to improve efficiency. That model requires assessors that are cross-trained to identify health hazards, but also be able to perform an energy audit. In addition, that model also requires contractors as well on the installation side that can do both, either that can do both or that know or have partnerships with other contractors that can do and provide the other services. Next slide, please. When you take that type of comprehensive approach, you can get pretty significant benefits from that. And some of these were mentioned before by Sarah and Josie, but you can get reduced energy consumption, reduced energy demand. There's a whole host of health benefits that can accrue, eliminating exposure to lead, improving indoor air quality are some of them. Can also get improved service reliability. So when there's less demand on the grid, there is the likelihood of shutoffs goes down. And there are also a number of longer term community and societal based benefits that can also accrue when taking this comprehensive approach to energy efficiency and healthy housing. And to learn more, we also have another publication here that's listed on the left. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about some of the efforts that are that have taken place in order to increase access to energy efficiency. One thing that I wanted to mention earlier and neglected to, but in addition to the barriers that Josie and Sarah mentioned, one of the biggest barriers to actually providing energy efficiency to those who need it most is deferred maintenance and poor housing conditions. And so a lot of energy efficiency programs do have a health and safety budget, but it's not significant enough to address the scale of condition or the scale of hazards that are present in the home. And that prevents a lot of people, a lot of households from actually accessing resources that can help them better support their energy needs and get to a place where their energy is more affordable. And that reason is because many efficiency programs, including the Federal Weatherization Assistance Program and many utility programs, will not perform the necessary efficiency if there are too many hazards there than the resources they have to address them. And so this case study here talks about the Maryland Energy Efficiency Plus program, which was funded by the Exelon Constellation merger. And what it did was it provided additional funding to the existing ratepayer funded energy efficiency program to address the common reasons for deferral. And so that includes roof repair, electrical system upgrades. It also included mold removal. And as you can see, the per house budget was pretty substantial, with a pretty substantial amount for health and safety. At first, when the program first launched, the budget for health and safety was 15 grand. And then they noticed that, they were easily meeting that and could spend more. And so they upped the budget up to 30 grand, which alleviated a lot of the deferrals that would have otherwise occurred. Next slide, please. In New York, New York is also piloting another model for ways to address health hazards. They are taking a healthcare approach. And so thinking about the benefits that can accrue when you alleviate or eliminate lead-based paint, when you improve indoor air quality, you're getting rid of asthma triggers. taking the healthcare cost savings that would accrue from preventing these types of illnesses and targeting and using that money to invest in preventing the conditions or alleviating the conditions that lead to those illnesses. And so they are working with the New York State Medicaid office within the Department of Public Health, the Department of Health, to pilot a model that takes healthcare dollars and directs those to improving housing conditions and pairing those with the state energy efficiency program infrastructure. So it's a really innovative approach. The program was intended to launch early 2020, but some big thing happened, and so they had to postpone that. I believe the program should be launching at some point this year. Next slide. And I'm just going to cover, I think, 2 more examples. So this year, late 2020, HUD, which administers the Lead Hazard Control and Healthy Homes grants that are offered every year to communities that apply. This year, for the first time ever, they offered a coordination demonstration grant that will support coordination with the entities that administer the sub-grantees of DOE's Weatherization Assistance Program. So entities like Action Housing, for example, would be able to apply for this grant, which would provide $1 million to support coordination with local lead program grantees. And the goal of this is to also reduce deferrals and to partner and to encourage administrators to partner with each other to maximize benefits within the home. So going in, addressing lead, using some of the healthy homes dollars to alleviate other healthy homes hazards other than lead, and then following up and performing weatherization to improve efficiency within the home as well. So this is a really innovative program. 2020 was the first time that this grant was released, and there will be another round later on this year. So if your jurisdiction has a HUD lead grant and also has a weatherization grant, you may want to encourage them to apply for that, because it's a really good opportunity. Next slide. So I believe this is my last slide here on some of the other innovations. But in the most recent omnibus bill that passed just before the new year, Congress gave the Secretary of the Department of Energy new powers that can help alleviate the issue of health and safety deferrals. One, the Secretary can now take into consideration improvements in health and other non-energy benefits when determining the cost effectiveness of certain measures. So things like window replacement, which are really costly, may now be able to meet the cost effectiveness requirement, given the fact that windows are often the primary mode of exposure for children. And the second is the Secretary may now create a separate grant program specifically to make homes weatherization ready by addressing structural, plumbing, roofing, and other issues that would otherwise have caused deferrals. These are tremendous innovations and will make a really significant impact on the ability of low-income households and other disinvested households to access energy efficiency and weatherization services that they greatly need. So I just want to highlight those. And when it comes to Pennsylvania, Act 129 came up. It's important that the efficiency programs in Pennsylvania take advantage of these innovations and also seek to improve access to energy efficiency. It's not enough to provide these types of services and resources without ensuring that everyone has access. And in order to do that, we have to invest more in improving housing quality and upgrading housing conditions. Next slide. and this is my last slide, as we are continuing to advance within energy efficiency and in improving energy affordability, it's important, bringing this full circle, that we take into account equity. Is everyone who needs the program able to access it? And that is something that is really important when we talk about, you know, the ability to lift all boats. We have to make sure that everyone has access to these types of resources and services. And housing quality is one of the things that we have to address. So to learn more about how to measure equity in these types of programs, there's another publication here on the right that I had the pleasure of working with Carlos Martin from the Urban Institute on, that goes into some of that. That is my last slide. I will stop talking, and I look forward to any questions that you all may have.
Thanks, Jamal. Excellent. And let me bring us back into, so we can see everybody and have a bit of a discussion. There's been some really good questions, and we have about 10 minutes left, give or take. I'm going to use moderator prerogative first to answer a couple of questions all at once. And a lot of people were asking, you know, what's available in my area, right? And so I think it's kind of cool. We have, you know, Jamal's got a national perspective. Sarah's from Pittsburgh. I'm from Harrisburg, and then we've got Josie in Philadelphia. So, I mean, PULP, the utility law project, we work on a statewide basis. So I can say that if you're wondering in your specific area, wherever you are in Pennsylvania, what programs are with the utilities, this is a great question you can pose to us anytime. You can reach out to us at pulp@palegalaid.net, and we can connect you with the program manager for the energy efficiency programs in your area, whether it's for tenants or for you know, if you've got a multifamily building that you're looking to do a retrofit for, or you've got a new construction, we know those program managers well. You know, we are currently in the middle of litigating each of the major electric companies' Act 129 energy efficiency and conservation plans, which will set forth the programming for the next 5 years as far as what's available through the utilities for multifamily and individual tenant properties. So if you have thoughts about how to improve those utility programs, reach out to me today, because I'm literally going to submit some testimony in these cases later on this afternoon. And so it would be great to have housing perspectives. We also work with the Housing Alliance a lot to advance some of this. So talk to them as well. But we need the perspective, because utilities and housing providers are not always talking to each other. And so the utilities build a program that doesn't work for the housing. But I want to get to a couple other of the really good
Liz,
questions. Yeah,
just
please.
to add really quickly, if you have questions about healthy homes programs to alleviate lead or other hazards, I can help with that as well. So if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out, and I can help with that.
Excellent. And I believe that all of our contact information is in the conference information, but if not, perhaps Housing Alliance could help us out to get each of your contact information out. And that's input. Thanks, Jamal, for pausing me there, because let me see, you know, Josie and Sarah and Jamal, do you have anything to add on that as far as how to connect with or identify the programs in each region?
I would just add that, you know, your electric utility provider, go to their website, and there's typically some information on programs that are available, and if not, who to contact there or a number to call.
Great.
And I'll say, often the health department, your local health department, will know if there are resources available for lead, and or the housing department. Those two should know what resources are available for lead, for asthma, mold reduction. So I would check out those websites.
And Jamal, you mentioned the weatherization assistance program, and you also talked about some deferral programs in Maryland. I just want to point out that there's also a deferral program through Pennsylvania's weatherization assistance program run through the Department of Community and Economic Development. So that, is yet another resource outside of the utility assistance programs. Um, but going back to the beginning, when we were talking about, and Josie was talking us through kind of the crisis we're facing right now with utility debt, there was a question about the new federal money that's coming for rental and utility assistance. And I know Josie and I have worked on this together, but is that, the question was, is that enough, or do we need more utility assistance?
We need more utility assistance. I mean, the arrears that I mentioned were for the regulated utilities, so that it doesn't cover the municipally owned, non-regulated utilities and water authorities in the state. And it is at that 800 million was as of the end of November. And we are just in the winter heating season. So this month and next month are typically high usage months. So the need is ongoing. You have a lot more people who are now low income, or whose income is uncertain, who are going to be struggling with housing costs for the foreseeable future. And as we're, on the long road to recovery, I think this is going to be a moving and an evolving need.
Jamal, Sarah, anything to add there? Okay. Let me move to some of the other questions. Want to ask, there's, and I think I tried to sweep some of these questions all together to talk about what's available across the state. But Sarah, can you talk about, and I know Action Housing operates in Pittsburgh, but can you answer what the question was, what counties Action Housing is operating in, and whether you assist landlords or property managers with retrofits? They were wondering about Lancaster County, but perhaps you could talk a little bit about how you got started in this, and whether there's good assistance out there that you turn to. I know you've been doing it a number of years now, but there was a time when you started. So wondering if you can share kind of how you got started in kind of this energy portfolio managing for your buildings.
Sure. Yeah. Action Housing builds buildings primarily in Allegheny County and Beaver County for our new construction housing. But we operate our weatherization assistance programs in Washington, Westmoreland, Greene, and another county I'm not remembering right now. Sorry. We don't go all the way to Lancaster. Lancaster, I guess, is the correct word term. I started at Action working on a program called the One Stop, which was a multifamily energy auditing program where we were energy auditors. We went into multifamily buildings and we assisted building owners with retrofits, figuring out what they needed, seeing what utility programs were available, and kind of, handheld them through that process. We no longer run that program, unfortunately, but that is how Action Housing kind of got into this energy policy work that Liz was speaking about with Pulp and the Housing Alliance. So we don't run that program anymore, but we do energy management for our own portfolio, where we identify buildings to retrofit, and then we take them through the process. So I can definitely give you pointers if you want to reach out to me on how to do that. We don't run that program anymore, so we don't assist other building owners, but always happy to talk to folks about the process.
Great. And we have 2 minutes left. So I'm going to ask each of you, and I'm going to start with Jamal, to kind of leave folks with the message that you think you want people to take away on this question of energy and housing nexus.
Yeah, I mean, there are resources available, not enough, echoing Josie there. to address energy affordability, improve housing quality, and make homes safer and more efficient. The issue is that those programs aren't aligned and coordinated. And so one step that we can take and that can be taken, and the folks watching can encourage those programs in your area to work more closely with, so if you're talking about a lead program, working closely with the utility or with an entity like Action Housing to provide more coordinated services so that you can get all of the resources that you need. So that would be the takeaway that I hope that folks get from my perspective.
Thanks, Jamal. Let's go to Sarah, and then we'll go to Josie.
Yeah, piggybacking off of that, I guess it's important for, folks to, as Liz mentioned, if you want to get involved in, energy policy, if you think that, there's not enough, programming in your area for multifamily or even single family, or they're not working together, I think that getting involved is important. As we've been trying for the last 10 years, and we will be continuing for the next 10, 20 years probably, is trying to get more weatherization dollars to multifamily and trying to intersect that with these healthy homes programs and lead and utility programs. It's an ongoing saga of trying to get everybody to work together to improve these buildings as they should be, so people have healthy, safe, energy efficient homes.
Great. And then Josie, you've got the last word. I know that we're gonna get the hook soon.
Yeah, we Max, I'm just gonna end that we're all in it together, and there are solutions that work for energy, homes, and affordability, and energy, and housing advocates. There are solutions that work for tenants and landlords and building developers, and that if we collaborate, we can provide benefits that really uplift everyone in our society.
Great. Thank you all for this excellent session. Thanks to the Housing Alliance for putting it together. I will encourage people one more time to reach out to myself or any of the panelists. We work very closely to get together across the state on these issues, and there are a number of really quick things that are pressing now that we need to address. There's legislation out there. There are proceedings, and we'll be really excited to work with you all on it. But we need the perspective of housing to come in here. So thanks, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your conference.